Welcome to the first episode of the Critical Coach podcast. So what's this podcast going to be? For now, it'll be me recording audio versions of the written articles that are available on the website at thecriticalcoach.com. But it's unlikely that every article will make it on here because some of them are heavily reliant on imagery, like the article about movement hierarchies. If I can, I'll try and adapt things so that they can find their way here in audio form, but no promises. Where can you get it? I'm trying to get it onto other services like iTunes and Spotify, but I'm still figuring that out, so bear with me. For now, you'll be able to find it at the top of each article on the website that has an audio version. In this first episode, Coding and Coaching Part 1, we're going to take a look at the mindset required to write good code and write good programs. And how we can use that same mindset to develop our own process for working with new clients, what sort of information we want to collect, and how we can use that information to write better training programs. So here we go, Coding and Coaching Part 1. A couple of years ago, I taught myself to code. Functional code requires knowledge of the relevant programming language and an ability to think systematically. Tiny language errors like a misspelt word or an absent semicolon result in code that won't run. If there's a flaw in your thinking, your code can still run, but it won't work the way you want it to. Some of you will already see where this is going, but I didn't, at least not for a while. It wasn't until I read Atul Gawande's The Checklist Manifesto that I realized the mindset required for functional code could translate to coaching. But that systematic mindset isn't easy for everyone to adopt. Why? Because humans aren't particularly good at systematic thinking, at least not innately. We can develop that ability, but we've got some inherent flaws which hold us back from perfecting it. First, we're not good at seeing things we aren't looking for. This is famously demonstrated by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris' selective attention tests. The original test became so well known that they had to develop another one to continue demonstrating the effect. The consequence of selective attention is that we unknowingly ignore the options we aren't focused on. Now, the original test asks you to watch a video and count how many times the players in white passed the basketball. At the end, you're asked how many passes did you count and did you see the gorilla? In the middle of the video, someone in a full gorilla costume walks to the center of the group, stops, beats their chest, and walks off. Just over 40% of viewers won't notice the gorilla. If you haven't seen the second test, I won't spoil it for you. You can find links to it and their original video in the podcast's description. Another cognitive flaw is that our capacity for rational thought is far more emotional than we'd like to admit. Jonathan Haidt wrote a whole book on this concept, The Righteous Mind. Haidt explains that we start with an emotional response, then we use rational thought to justify the emotion. That process compromises our assessment of information. When you see information from a source you like, you ask yourself, can I believe this? But when it comes from a source you don't like, you ask yourself, must I believe this? The way the question's framed affects how easy it is to respond yes or no. The consequence of emotional decision-making is that we can fall for crappy ideas because we like the source, or discard good ideas when we don't like the source. Having a high IQ doesn't make you immune to this flaw. Instead, it helps you generate more persuasive justifications. Third, we're not very good at logic problems, at least not under certain conditions. In a lecture titled Concepts and Reasoning, Steven Pinker does a wonderful job of illustrating how flawed our cognitive processes can be. You can find a link to a clip from that lecture in the podcast's description. Pinker goes on to point out that we are indeed capable of rational thought and reason. Of course we are. If we weren't, how could you use reason to persuade anyone of anything? It's not that we're incapable of reason, but that our capacity for it depends on the circumstances. What makes this problem particularly tricky is that we don't realize when circumstances have conspired to mislead us. Lastly, experience, education, qualifications, and titles are not protective against error, as Gawande makes clear in the Checklist Manifesto. Quote, "We continue to have upwards of 150,000 deaths following surgery every year, more than 3 times the number of road traffic fatalities. Moreover, research has consistently showed that at least half our deaths and major complications are avoidable. The knowledge exists, but however supremely specialized and trained we may have become, steps are still missed, mistakes are still made." End quote. In order to compensate for our flaws, we need to create and use processes that remove or at least minimize opportunities to make mistakes. This is the central premise of Gawande's book. Technically, those processes are algorithms, a set of rules for solving a problem. Now, you might think algorithms are the sole purview of mathematicians and programmers, but you'd be wrong. Algorithmic rules take the form of if-then statements. If X is true, do Y. If X is false, do Z. Here's an example. If the alarm goes off, then get out of bed. Or maybe you use a more complex algorithm. If the alarm has gone off once, then go back to sleep. But if the alarm has gone off 3 times, then get the fuck up. Once you've got your head around a single if-then statement, you can combine them to create a branching decision tree. That branching decision tree allows the creation of sophisticated algorithms capable of answering complex questions. They're more difficult to develop, but the payoff's worth it. Once the algorithm's created, it does the hard work or boring work or time-consuming work for you. All you need to do is collect and provide the information it needs to solve the problem. So, how does all of this translate to coaching? If you want to be consistently successful with different clients and different problems, you'd better have a good algorithm. A good algorithm, that is a decision tree, is accurate and efficient. Furthermore, it provides the correct answer with the minimum number of steps. To create one, start with the outcome you want and work backwards. What problems need to be solved in order to achieve that outcome? What information is required to solve those problems? How should you get that information? Once you've got a working prototype, test it and make adjustments to improve it. As a coach, the outcome is to achieve the client's goals. But sometimes the client's goals are unachievable or unrealistic. If that is the case, you'll need to manage their expectations or adjust their goals. But there's a catch. You need more information that you don't yet possess, to make that decision. For now, proceed as if their goals are plausible and be prepared to make adjustments or manage their expectations at a later date. In the world of strength and conditioning, goals are achieved as a consequence of physiological adaptation or change. That adaptation occurs in response to stress. Therefore, a coach's job is to identify what adaptations are necessary and create a training program that appropriately guides the application of stress. Now we've got our outcome and the main problems we need to solve. Our outcome is to create a training program that guides the application of stress to achieve the client's goals. The problems we need to solve are: what are the client's goals, what adaptations are necessary to achieve those goals, and how should stress be applied to achieve those adaptations. Next, we need to identify what information is required to solve those problems. Answering the first question is simple. Ask the client what their goals are. This is usually done as part of an interview. Once you know what the client's goals are, you can identify some of the adaptations required to achieve them, be they bigger muscles, less fat, a heavier deadlift, etc. However, there's usually obstacles to the client's goals that they're unaware of. Some of those obstacles, for example, a faulty motor pattern or limited work capacity, will require adaptation. Others, like fused vertebrae or limited training time, can't be overcome. Instead, they must be accommodated. Some clients will bring inherent advantages with them. Advantages can be exploited to achieve the client's goals in a shorter period of time. Again, the client might be unaware of them, so we need to prod them for information. Maybe they're a former gymnast, boxer, or dancer. If they are, Their coordination, proprioception, and work capacity is probably better than the average person's. Lastly, we want to know about the client's training preferences. Training preferences include specific exercises and sports they enjoy, how often they can train and how long those training sessions can be, which days of the week they'll be training and at what times. If you're coaching long distance via the internet, you'll also want to know what sort of equipment is available to them. In conclusion, people are flawed. We can't change that fact, but we can create processes that account for those flaws, that try to overcome them or minimize their effects. To create those processes, we start with the outcome we want and identify what problems must be solved to achieve that outcome. In our case, our outcome is to create a training program that guides the application of stress to achieve the client's goals. The problems we need to solve are: what are the client's goals, what adaptations are necessary to achieve those goals, and how should stress be applied to achieve those adaptations. Solving those problems requires the collection and analysis of information. The information we want relates to the following: goals, obstacles, advantages, and training preferences. In part 2, we'll begin to look at how that information is gathered.